His name was Gang Lu, a rising star in the world of science, a one-in-a-million talent from the Department of Physics at Peking University, and the pride of his entire village. Sponsored to study in the United States, he seemed destined for greatness. But his journey took a dark turn, culminating in a tragic incident that would shock the world and become a chilling cautionary tale in academia. What drove him to such extremes? And who was he, truly, beneath the accolades and ambitions? In this episode, we will analyze and explain the 1991 University of Iowa Gang Lu shooting case. The quiet town of Iowa City was forever altered on November 1st, 1991, when a senseless act of violence claimed the lives of 5 individuals and left one more severely injured. The perpetrator, Gang Lu, a 28-year-old Chinese graduate student, carried out a mass shooting that sent shockwaves through the University of Iowa and the broader academic community. The tragedy unfolded on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, marking one of the darkest days in the institution's history. Lu's deadly rampage, which lasted just 10 minutes, targeted members of the physics and astronomy department and administrative staff, leaving a trail of grief, confusion, and unanswered questions. Lu's attack was not a random act of violence, but rather the culmination of simmering resentments and personal grievances. He had recently earned his doctoral degree from the University of Iowa, but his achievements were overshadowed by feelings of perceived injustice and failure. The prestigious Spriestersbach Dissertation Prize, which he had hoped to win, had eluded him, intensifying his anger and sense of betrayal. For Lu, who had invested years of his life in his academic pursuits, the prize represented not just a monetary award, but a validation of his intellectual worth and a potential pathway to a secure future in the United States. The massacre raised complex questions about academic pressure, mental health, and the experiences of international students in American universities. It highlighted the need for institutions to recognize the signs of distress and to provide adequate support to students who may struggle with cultural isolation or feelings of inadequacy. This narrative delves into the life of Gang Lu, the events leading up to the tragedy, and the lasting impact of the shooting, seeking to understand how a promising academic career turned into a horrific act of violence. Gang Lu was born in 1962 in the People's Republic of China, a country undergoing profound socio-political changes. Growing up during the Cultural Revolution, he witnessed a period marked by upheaval and the suppression of intellectual and academic pursuits. Despite these challenges, Lu showed early promise as a student, demonstrating a keen aptitude for physics, which would eventually set him on a path toward higher education in one of the world's most prestigious academic environments. His academic journey began in earnest at Peking University, where he pursued a degree in physics and prepared for a future that he hoped would extend beyond China's borders. In the mid-1980s, China's education system was evolving, and there was a growing push to send talented students abroad to further their studies. Lu was among those who seized this opportunity, passing the highly competitive China-US physics examination and application, CHUS-PEA. This exam allowed a select group of Chinese students to attend graduate programs in the United States, a country whose universities were renowned for their advanced research in the sciences. Lu's successful completion of the CHUS-PEA exam paved the way for his admission to the University of Iowa, where he embarked on a challenging journey toward a doctoral degree in physics. Upon his arrival in Iowa City, Lu found himself in a vastly different cultural landscape. The transition from China to the United States posed significant challenges, including adapting to a new language, culture, and academic system. For many international students, the process of assimilation can be daunting, and Lu was no exception. Although he was a capable and dedicated student, his interactions with peers and faculty were often marked by a sense of isolation. He was described by some as a solitary figure who kept to himself, occasionally exhibiting signs of frustration when confronted with setbacks or disagreements. Lu's dedication to his studies was evident in his work ethic and commitment to research. His dissertation, titled Study of the Critical Ionization Velocity Effect by Particle and Cell Simulation, reflected years of meticulous study in the field of theoretical space plasma physics. However, despite his accomplishments, Lu harbored deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and resentment. These emotions were further compounded by the academic culture at the university, where competition was intense and recognition could be elusive. The turning point for Liu came when the coveted D.C. Spriestersbach Dissertation Prize, which he believed he deserved, was awarded to another student. The prize was not merely a financial award, but also a symbol of academic excellence and a potential stepping stone to a career in the United States. For Liu, who was eager to avoid returning to China following the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989, winning the prize seemed essential for securing a postdoctoral position and establishing a future in America. The disappointment of losing the prize intensified his feelings of rejection, fueling a growing resentment toward the academic community. Liu's fixation on the Spriestersbach Dissertation Prize grew over time, transforming from a professional setback into a personal affront. He came to believe that the prize committee's decision reflected a fundamental lack of recognition of his abilities. This sense of grievance was exacerbated by his interactions with faculty members, some of whom had served on his dissertation committee. Among them was Professor Christoph K. Gertz, a leading theoretical space plasma physicist, who had been Liu's dissertation advisor and mentor. Gertz had provided guidance and feedback throughout Liu's academic career, yet Liu's perception of being overlooked led him to view even Gertz with increasing suspicion. Liu's feelings of alienation were not solely academic. As an international student, he experienced cultural isolation that complicated his attempts to integrate into American society. While Iowa City was home to a diverse student population, the small-town atmosphere and Midwestern culture were worlds apart from the bustling life of Beijing, where Liu had spent much of his youth. The distance from his family and the political upheaval in China during that time, particularly the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square protests, added to his sense of displacement. Many Chinese students who had come to the United States were seeking ways to remain in the country, fearing political persecution or limited opportunities if they returned home. For Liu, securing a position in the U.S. was not just a career ambition, but also a personal necessity. Despite these pressures, Liu rarely sought support or confided in others about his struggles. Some fellow students noted that he could be temperamental, especially when his ideas were challenged, but there was little indication that his frustrations would manifest in violence. His tendency to internalize his grievances created a dangerous buildup of resentment, which was further fueled by the academic culture that rewarded competition and individual achievement over collaboration and community. In the months leading up to the shooting, Liu's behavior became increasingly erratic. He remained in Iowa City after receiving his doctoral degree in May 1991, struggling to find a postdoctoral position. His deteriorating mental state was apparent in the letters he wrote, which were discovered after the incident. 5 letters in total were found, 4 in English and 1 in Chinese, intended to be sent to news organizations to explain his actions. Although the contents of these letters were never publicly released, those who read them described them as a mixture of grievances against faculty members, frustrations about his career prospects, and philosophical musings on life and death. It was clear that Liu had spent considerable time planning his attack, indicating a premeditated intent rather than a spontaneous outburst. The University of Iowa, like many American institutions of higher education, had a competitive academic culture that could be both stimulating and challenging for students. Within the physics and astronomy department, where Liu was a doctoral candidate, there was a high level of expectation placed on graduate students to perform at the forefront of research. The stakes were particularly high in theoretical physics, a field where advancements often depended on deep mathematical understanding and innovative problem solving. In this environment, the pressure to secure grants, publish papers, and earn prestigious awards was palpable, creating a hierarchy where recognition was a marker of one's future prospects. For international students like Gang Liu, these pressures were compounded by the challenges of navigating a different educational system, the expectations for self-directed study, and the competitive nature of graduate programs could be daunting for students who were accustomed to different academic practices. Additionally, language barriers and cultural differences in communication often led to misunderstandings or misinterpretations of social cues. These challenges could be especially difficult for Chinese students who had grown up in a society where academic achievement was closely tied to familial and societal expectations. Failure, or perceived failure, carried a significant stigma, and for many, the thought of returning home without securing a prestigious position abroad was unthinkable. Cultural differences also influenced how grievances and disputes were handled. In American academia, it was not uncommon for students to engage in open debates or challenge the opinions of faculty members. However, in Chinese academic culture, such confrontations could be seen as disrespectful or disruptive. Lu's grievances, therefore, remained largely unaddressed, as he may have found it difficult to express his frustrations in a manner that would be taken seriously within the academic system. This cultural gap contributed to a growing sense of isolation, where Lu felt his concerns were neither understood nor valued. The political climate also played a role in shaping the experiences of Chinese students in the United States during this period. The Tiananmen Square protests of 1989 had led to a violent crackdown in China, prompting many Chinese students abroad to seek ways to remain in the U.S. The uncertainty about their futures added to the psychological pressure they faced, as staying in the U.S. was often seen as a safer and more prosperous alternative to returning to an unstable political environment. For Lu, the Spriestersbach Prize represented a chance to improve his chances of securing a job in the United States, making the loss of the award not just a professional disappointment, but also a perceived threat to his future stability. The decision to award the 1991 Spriestersbach Dissertation Prize to another student marked a turning point for Lu. The prize was highly regarded within the academic community, recognizing the best dissertation produced in a given year at the university. For Lu, the prize signified more than just academic recognition. It was a symbol of his dedication and validation of his years of hard work. He had invested a significant portion of his life in completing his dissertation, and losing the prize not only shattered his sense of achievement, but also exacerbated his fears about his career prospects. Rumors circulated among students and faculty that Lu believed the prize committee had favored another candidate due to personal biases or internal politics within the department. Although there was no evidence to support these claims, Lu's perception of the situation was enough to fuel his growing resentment. He began to view the loss as a deliberate act of injustice, a conclusion that became a fixation in the months leading up to the shooting. His grievances extended beyond the prize itself to a broader critique of the academic system, which he felt had failed to recognize his potential and contributions. In the absence of a postdoctoral position, Lu's future appeared increasingly uncertain. Despite his impressive academic background, he struggled to find a suitable opportunity that would allow him to remain in the U.S. The looming possibility of returning to China, coupled with his anger over the perceived injustices he faced, became an unbearable weight on Lu's psyche. The prospect of returning to China not only felt like a professional step backward, but also carried social and cultural implications. In his mind, the lack of recognition in the form of the Spriestersbach Dissertation Prize symbolized a larger failure that would reflect poorly on him in the eyes of his family and peers. These feelings of inadequacy and resentment festered, increasingly taking over his thoughts and pushing him toward a drastic course of action. In the months before the shooting, Lu's mental state continued to deteriorate. Although he still maintained a veneer of normalcy, his behavior became more erratic. Lu's isolation intensified as he withdrew further from his peers and avoided social interactions. The few people who interacted with him during this period observed a noticeable change in his demeanor. He seemed more agitated and was often preoccupied with the perceived injustices against him. However, at the time, there was little awareness or understanding of how deeply his sense of rejection and despair had taken hold. The morning of November 1st, 1991, started like any other day at the University of Iowa. Van Allen Hall, a hub for the physics and astronomy department, was bustling with students and faculty members engaged in lectures, research meetings, and routine academic activities. Around 3:40 p.m., Gang Lu entered the building with a .38 caliber revolver hidden in his jacket, along with a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol that he ultimately did not use. His target was the Theoretical Space Plasma Physics Research Group meeting taking place in a conference room on the 3rd floor, a meeting he had once attended regularly as a graduate student. Lu entered the room and without hesitation began firing at the attendees. The first person he shot was his former dissertation advisor, Professor Christoph K. Gertz, who was killed instantly. Lu then turned the gun on Associate Professor Robert A. Smith, also a member of his dissertation committee, and Linhua Shan, a postdoctoral researcher and former roommate. Both men were fatally wounded. Lu's actions were methodical. He aimed at specific individuals who he felt had wronged him. The gunfire caused chaos and panic as the remaining attendees fled the room, while Lu calmly exited and made his way down to the second floor. His next target was Dwight R. Nicholson, the chairman of the Physics and Astronomy Department. Nicholson had played a significant role in the decisions regarding the dissertation committee and the prize selection, making him a symbolic figure of Lu's grievances. As Lu entered Nicholson's office, he shot the professor multiple times, killing him instantly. After leaving Van Allen Hall, Lu walked 3 blocks to Jessup Hall, where the Office of Academic Affairs was located. Here, his target was T. Ann Cleary, an associate vice president for academic affairs who had been involved in handling grievances, including some of Lu's. He entered her office and shot her in the head. She would succumb to her injuries the following day. Lu then turned his gun on Mia Rodolfo Sioson, a 23-year-old student who worked in the office. The bullet left Rodolfo Sioson paralyzed from the neck down, and she would later die of complications related to her injuries in 2008. After the shooting, Lu retreated to a nearby room in Jessup Hall. Police arrived at the scene soon after, but by the time they reached Lu, he had already taken his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The shooting had lasted just 10 minutes, leaving 5 people dead, 1 severely injured, and a university community reeling from the shock and horror of what had occurred. The University of Iowa shooting sent shockwaves through the campus and beyond, leaving students, faculty, and staff struggling to comprehend the scale of the tragedy. In the immediate aftermath, the university implemented emergency measures to secure the campus and provide support for those affected. Counseling services were made available to students and staff, and a memorial service was organized to honor the victims. The sheer senselessness of the violence prompted many to ask what could have led a once promising academic to commit such an act. In the weeks and months that followed, details about Lu's grievances and his troubled mental state began to emerge. Investigations revealed that Lu had meticulously planned the attack, as evidenced by the letters found in his possession. Although these letters were never publicly released, some reports indicated that they contained a mix of philosophical reflections, grievances against specific faculty members, and expressions of despair. The letters suggested that Lu saw the act as a form of revenge against those he believed had ruined his academic and professional future. The incident also raised questions about the university's handling of student grievances and the support systems available to international students. Some argued that Lu's situation highlighted broader issues within academia, such as the intense pressure to succeed, the lack of mental health resources, and the challenges faced by international students adapting to a new culture. The tragedy brought attention to the need for universities to proactively address the mental health of their students and provide adequate support for those struggling with academic and personal challenges. Mia Rodolfo Sioson, the lone survivor of the shooting, became a symbol of resilience and courage in the face of adversity. Despite being paralyzed from the neck down, she pursued a life dedicated to activism and advocacy for people with disabilities. Her experiences gave her a unique perspective on the importance of accessibility and the rights of disabled individuals. Rodolfo Sioson became an advocate for social justice, working with various organizations to promote disability awareness. Her story served as a poignant reminder of the enduring impact of violence and the human spirit's capacity to find purpose even after profound loss. For the families of the victims, the aftermath was marked by an overwhelming sense of grief and the struggle to come to terms with the senselessness of the violence. Memorials and tributes were established to honor the lives and contributions of the deceased faculty members and students, ensuring that their legacies would not be forgotten. The Physics and Astronomy Department in particular mourned the loss of several key figures whose contributions to the field had been significant. In the years since the University of Iowa shooting, the incident has remained a point of reflection for the academic community, prompting discussions about the importance of mental health, campus safety, and cultural inclusion. The tragedy highlighted the pressures faced by graduate students, particularly international students, who may encounter additional challenges in adapting to a new culture while managing academic demands. Institutions have since taken steps to improve mental health resources, grievance procedures, and support systems for students who may be at risk. The incident also underscored the need for a more compassionate approach to handling student grievances, recognizing that issues such as academic disappointment or cultural isolation can exacerbate underlying mental health conditions. While it is impossible to predict every potential act of violence, universities have worked to develop early warning systems and protocols for identifying students in distress. The tragedy has also influenced broader discussions about gun violence on college campuses, leading to the implementation of stricter security measures and active shooter training. The 1991 University of Iowa shooting remains a tragic reminder of the potential consequences when academic pressures, cultural dislocation, and mental health struggles converge. The event not only shook a university community, but also left a lasting impact on how institutions approach student support and safety. The legacy of those who lost their lives serves as a call to action to continue improving mental health awareness and providing the resources necessary to help students navigate the challenges of academic life. While nothing can undo the pain and loss endured by the victims' families and the community, the lessons learned from this tragedy can inform efforts to prevent future incidents. The story of Gang Lu is a somber tale of ambition turned to despair, and a stark reminder of the need for empathy, understanding, and proactive support in academic institutions.